If you're an empath, trust me, what I will tell you today will change everything. So, if you're somebody who absorbs negative emotion, if you're somebody who goes into a space and afterwards you feel completely depleted, if you are around people, even people that you love, and you feel like whatever they're going through becomes part of your life, becomes part of your internal feeling state, then this will definitely change your perspective on things. Because I'm here to tell you how you can change all of that without having hard conversations, without telling people to, be quiet, not tell you about their day. And you can actively stop absorbing those negative emotions. And the strategy that I'm going to talk to you about today has not only worked wonders for me, but has worked wonders for the hundreds of clients that I've worked with throughout the years through one-on-one coaching with the people in bootcamp. And so I find this very, very useful, and I don't want to hide it from you because I am somebody who has been affected by other people's energy very, very strongly. And not only in a negative way, I also loved, being a part of other people's worlds. And I know the difference. Like, I can't even tap into those states anymore because I have chosen a different way of being. Before we get started and I explain how to do this step by step, I want to remind you, if you haven't done this so far, to download the free poster on the INFJ Priority Code Checklist. And if you want to take it to the next level, in August only, I offer a bundle price for the Energy Mastery and the Financial Abundance course. You can find this through the link in the description. And also, our next INFJ Epic Life Bootcamp live call is coming up August 29th. We will focus on prosperity, and that will also be the topic for the next month. So join the hundreds of INFJs who are creating an INFJ Epic Life together. Everything you need to know you can find through links in the description. As empaths, we have learned how to be hyper aware of other people's emotional states. Some of us have learned this through trauma. Others have learned it because it's a skill of ours. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter for what I'm about to tell you, but the fact is that we know how to tap into other people's emotional states to read people very, very precisely because it's a way of controlling the situation. And when we were younger, this was probably a very effective method. When you're a child and you're dependent on caregivers or on authority figures, and this has worked for you, of course it's a good strategy, right? When you understand somebody, when you understand what will make them happy, when you understand what will make them like you, you're safer. But the problem with this is if you're open to other people's emotional states, they will also, dump their emotional energy onto you. And people are not even doing this in a conscious way. It's just if you have emotions that are negative in any kind of way, you will dump them the easiest way possible, right? This is the path of least resistance. And as empaths, we're like right there, and we just give off the energy of tell me your problems because I'm going to fix them, right? This is not something you have to actively say, but the point of the matter is if you don't make people feel bad for putting their negative emotions on you, and you on top of that have a capacity to stay in that space and still be present, people will continue doing this because they don't have another outlet. If you don't have empaths in your life, and then there's this one person who will be present, who can listen to you, who will not only sympathize with you, but they will understand your pain to such an extent that you don't feel alone, you will continue with that behavior. And this can happen from a person who just shares with you their heartbreak, but it can also, be shared with you in a way of, oh, I'm really, really angry about what's happening at my work, and I'm going to let all of that anger out on you. All of this is a typical pattern for empaths. And I used to be like this. I used to be keenly aware of what my best friend was going through in college. I knew her, emotional world very well, and it was very like she's an artist. So there's a lot of, emotional states that I just love to be in because it, altered my state. And when you're an empath and you're leaning into this, you're also very, fluid in such an extent that you are a chameleon. When you're with one person, you absorb their world and you adapt to that energy. When you're with somebody else, you adapt as well and things are different. So I understand being in that state. And I remember vividly thinking, that's just how I am. There are people who are not empaths, and then there are people like me. And that's just how I go through life. I'm affected by those things. If I go into a restaurant and the mood is off, I will feel it. And now I can tell you, I'm not like this anymore. And I don't regret it one bit. So I have learned that being an empath is a skill. It's something that, of course, is, genetically preconditioned somehow. Like, I still believe I'm way more empathetic than somebody who just has no connection to this. And, I have people in my life who just can't read situations, and I will always be way more able to understand a situation, understand another person's emotional state, to be affected by that in a positive and negative way. But I also know the difference of leaning into this and knowing that I can dial it back way, way more than I thought possible. And so what is the difference? Well, the thing is this: when you are not anchoring in who you are into reality, and I've talked about it in the last video, but when it comes to this, I will make it very specific as well. But when you're not doing this, you're able to be influenced by other people's emotional states. So if I haven't defined for myself, this is who I'm going to be, I'm open to being changed. And there's beauty in that. I love to be transformed in so many ways. I love to be open to, what life brings to me. And this is a very yin energy, right? Being able to receive, being able to be present, to experience life. And this is a beautiful concept, and it's something I don't want to miss from my life, but it's just not the complete answer. There's also the yang part. And the yang part, and we all, no matter, who we are, we all need both. And the yang part is about defining this is who I am and asserting my energy onto the world. And, so often I felt like I am not allowed to put my stamp onto the world of this is who I am and this is not up for debate, because I felt like I'm taking something away from others. Why did I feel this way? Because that's how it felt to me. Every single time somebody came into my life and, they were all in their own energy and they were absorbed by it, maybe through pain or, whatever, reason for this, it doesn't even matter, just their personality. I felt like, okay, I need to take a step back, right? Because they're now in the front row, right? That's the typical, I'm dimming my light for other people. But this, of course, is a perception, because if everybody says I'm going to be all that I am, there's still room for everybody. I don't need to be the center of attention all the time. It's not who I am, and that doesn't make me better or worse than somebody else. Like, there are people who just live in the spotlight. When I'm around my friends, for example, I like to be the one who sits in the back and doesn't do much, okay? That's who I actually am. I have a lot to say in those videos. I'm of course the center in my small family because my kids are around me all the time. But generally speaking, I'm not somebody who's like the leader of a group. It's just not my energy. But still, it's a huge difference to how I was in family situations 10 years ago and how I am now. Because I have learned that if I am all that I want to be, I'm still not going to be, the big celebrity somewhere, because as I said, it's not part of my identity, and it's still going to be way more than I used to be. So often we feel if I'm not dimming my light, I'm going to, take up too much space. You're not. If everybody showed up the way they felt most comfortable, we would all be fine, right? We're not meant to dim our light. We don't need to dim our light for other people. You're not taking anything away from anybody by being all that you are. So what does that have to do with observing other people's energy? The more you anchor in who you are and you make it a non-negotiable, right? We very often in bootcamp work with archetypes. So I feel the archetype that are most fitting for me are priestess warrior. And I've learned this is not something that is up for debate. If there are people around me who feel less good about themselves if I show up as that archetype, then it's on them to make a decision if they want to be in my life and how close psychologically they want to be in my life. Most people in my life that I felt like I was absorbing their negative energy, this was all happening because in their presence, I wasn't showing up as that archetype that I feel most comfortable with. Because I felt like if I show up in all that I am, I'm taking something away from them. Or even worse, I will unconsciously mirror something back to them that will remind them of what they're not tapping into yet. Things that I'm confident in that they're not. And if I'm proudly standing in them, they will be confronted with the fact that they're not that, or that they're not tapping into that yet. And as empaths, we're very aware of those things. All the people whose negative energy that you're absorbing, you know that they have some insecurity, something that they don't feel comfortable with, and we take it upon ourselves to be the martyr, to be the understanding person, to be the one that's going to make their life easier by not mirroring or, showing up as the version that's going to remind them of that. And yes, I've had difficult conversations, but it's not a must. And I haven't had them with everybody. I've had them with family members where there was so much energy of, people wanting me to be a version that I'm not. And I always allowed that dynamic to happen. And yes, sometimes you have to make people feel the consequences of what kind of energy they put on you. I always like to give the example of the kid that is being told, never touch the stove, you're going to burn your finger. But they're going to continue doing it because they're curious. No matter how much you tell them, at some point, I'm not saying every time it happens, but for this example's sake, they touch the stove, they burn their finger. Once they burn their finger a little bit, they're not going to do this again, right? So people, particularly when, we're talking about dynamics that are happening on such a subconscious level, because it's not like most people are actively going out of their way and saying, this is an empath. This is somebody who is going to be there for me, so I'm going to dump all my negative emotions on them. Most of the time, these things happen because people are in pain and they're not aware, because how they've been raised or how they've been conditioned, and because of the dynamic that, has played out between you two forever. So, and the more you actually start saying, there's a part of me that's not up for debate, and I'm going to make choices in my life that represent that. I'm going to only talk about things that I'm willing to talk about. Meaning, if your family member, for example, constantly asks you, how's your dating life going? Then, you're allowed to say, everything is the way it's supposed to be. What's going on with this and this? You're allowed to stop conversations when they're going into a direction that you don't like. If you say, I absorb a lot of negative energy if I just go into a space like, a restaurant, then how does this apply? Well, it applies because if you start saying there's a part of me that's not up for debate, and I'm going to anchor it in, meaning there are things that are happening in the outside world that I always call externally observable facts that amplify who I am. So for me, that meant, starting this channel, leaning into a direction where I, before I did this and I was still working in the corporate job, I took on more and more projects where I could work independently. And if I work with people, I made sure that I leaned into a direction where I was actively choosing who I want to work with. I had partners at my last job who didn't want to work with me because I wasn't bowing down to them on a personal level. And this is a good thing. There's so many upcoming, male colleagues of mine who, were looking to go up that ladder and wanted that partner to like them. And I was like, no, I'm going to be all that I am. I'm going to lean into the things that I want to do. And if they don't want to work with me, great, the better. But I'm not going to adapt who I am to make it easier for people to be around me. And the more you do this, the more your internal energy changes. It really is that way. Like I, leaned more into my yang side. That meant that overall, when I go into a room, there's more of my energy that shows up. This is something that you can practice. Before, It was like only showing up when I was with people one on one, and we were in a really intimate setting, and that's when I allowed more of my energy to come out. Now it's really like no matter where I go, even if I don't say much, there's more presence there because I've practiced this and because my environment has amplified and mirrored it back to me. The family members that I have, they have learned not to have those conversations with me where they're putting me down because I'm not having a relationship with them while they're doing this. This is not just about setting boundaries. This is more about saying, I am anchoring in who I want to be. Now I'm somebody who has my own business. Now I'm somebody who, has my own family. I'm taking charge. And if you want to be part of my life, there are certain rules you have to live by. Meaning, for example, you're not going to put your negative energy onto me because if you do, there are going to be consequences. So often people say, well, how do I set a boundary, as an empath to make sure that this is not happening? And we often say, well, people are not respecting my boundaries. Setting boundaries isn't about like telling people what they shouldn't do. Setting boundaries is about telling people this is what I'm going to do if you continue doing this, and then actually do it. If you are not creating real consequences, like for example, not calling the person for a week, like being less available, being colder, whatever it may be, if there are no consequences that they will feel viscerally, they will continue with their behavior. And the more you do this, the more people you talk to this way, the more situations you create in your life that are a representation of that new version of yourself, the less it's going to happen that you absorb energy. Because all that space that you normally hollow out, you actually fill up with yourself. And this is not some esoteric or some woo thing. No, this is just, actual showing up, focused energy that you bring to the table. And I can tell you this as somebody who's lived this and who didn't think it was possible. When my best friend from college, I just talked to her on the phone today for an hour. Like, I love talking to her and I love our exchanges. This is nothing to do with how our dynamic was when we were in college, where all my energy was focused on her. I'm not aware of her internal states. I'm not aware of her artistic side the way I used to because I have filled up my energy. I'm focused more on the music that I like, on the future that I like to build for myself, on the things that make me excited, right? It's about building that muscle up. So this is a constant thing that you're doing without even recognizing it. Because it fills you up. It makes you feel alive. Being in your yin energy isn't the thing that's going to make you alive if this is the only thing that you're doing. We all need a balance. And the more I'm leaning into that yang energy, the more it becomes something that is happening on autopilot. And I still would consider myself as somebody who's way more yin than yang, right? I'm an introvert, I'm an INFJ, I'm an empath, like all of those, qualities and personality traits and all of that are just a representation of how much more I lean into, the other direction of, absorbing life and all of that. But that doesn't mean that being balanced isn't requiring me to actually lean more into my yang energy. It allows me actually to be more balanced. And the more you create that balance for yourself, the more you actually fill up space within you that is meant to be filled up by you. And when this is filled up, when this is full of life, you're not absorbing other people's energy that much because there's just not so much room left. And this might be a metaphor, but this is exactly how it feels. And so I do feel different now when I go into restaurants, where there's negative energy. I do feel different when I'm, around people who fight. I still don't like it, and I'm much more likely to leave that situation earlier instead of staying in it and feeling guilty and bad and just saying I have to stay there. That's happening. And of course, I'm still affected by it to some extent, way more than some other people. But you can't compare to how I felt when I wasn't taking charge of that. So you can change it. And the best part about it is that once you say, I'm going to lean into this and being more of who I am, and I'm going to exude more of my energy. I'm not only not dimming my light for other people, I'm going to actually be as bright and as big as I possibly can, because I'm not taking anything away from anybody. I'm not overextending myself, but I'm just, at this perfect balance I'm trying to create. The more you're also going to create the life that is in alignment with who you are, because you're not going to put energy into shining bright in areas that don't matter to you. Like, that's just way too exhausting. The thing that feels most natural and that works on autopilot is if you put your energy into exuding who you naturally are. That just feels like play. That just feels like being alive. And so when you're leaning into this, you're getting so many benefits, one of which is that you're not absorbing other people's negative energies. Although you would consider yourself an empath and you have experienced being at the center of, pulling negative energy towards you because you can just feel other people's pain and you don't want to leave them alone with this. We have to understand that just because we can, that doesn't mean that we should take on other people's pain, specifically if we know that we're not really saving anybody. We can't save anybody but ourselves. We can be an example of what it means to save ourselves by, leaning into who we are. And through that, we're actually being the best help for the people around us, even the ones with the negative energy, because we're showing an example of what it means to be in your own light. So remember, if you haven't done this, to download the free poster on the INFJ Priority Code checklist. If you want to take to the next level, this month only, I offer a special bundle price for the energy and the financial abundance course. And lastly, if you're ready for it, join the hundreds of INFJs in our INFJ Epic Life Bootcamp. This month, we're focusing on prosperity, and it all starts with our live call August 29th. Everything you need to know you can find through the links in the description. And if you want to watch another video now that is in line with today's topic, then check out the video you see on the screen right now. I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.